Hey, hello, First Stage here, and today I want to talk to you about Simulation Publication Incorporated's DragonQuest 1980, 81, and 89 versions, editions 1, 2, and 3. A classic role-playing game of back in the day, but a game that I've just recently been playing. And I want to talk to you about it and just see what you think. It's a fascinating look at a game kind of towards the early phase of the hobby. I don't know, where are we? You're roughly 5 years in, actually, with the first edition. Dragon Quest is quite a noted game for being a little bit different of the time. It's skill-based, mostly. And it's quite tactical. It's not a big sack of hit point game. It has ranks for individual skills. It has a tactical display. It's to be played on a hex grid. It's by SPI. Now, Simulation Publications Incorporated at the time were a noted war game producer. And I, as a young lad, sort of pre-role-playing, was quite into skirmish gamings and war gamings, and I used to go and look at their folio sets, their sort of plastic tray, cardboard chit and map sets, which they had many, and they were just about affordable for a young wallet. Avalon Hill, perhaps their competitors, a little bit more expensive, perhaps slightly more expensive components to their games. But SPI I knew all about. But they branched into role-playing. They did a few role-playing games. Commando, which I haven't seen. Again, that's a World War II, I think. Action shooter. Part skirmish game, war game, part role-play. Dragon Quest, which was their fantasy role-playing game. And Universe, which was their science fiction role-playing game. I missed Dragon Quest back in the day. So 1981, I just started in the hobby. I played AD&D First Edition, Traveller, and actually RuneQuest, which was a contemporary game. Dragon Quest may superficially be, given that it's skill-based, it's not a sack of hit points. You may think it's a bit like RuneQuest. It's very different to RuneQuest. But it does have some similarities, as we're going to see. You can still get the game, and I'll show you, or at least I'll talk to you a little bit about how to get the game, and there'll be a link in the show notes on where you can go and get an open source version of it. It's not available in the shops, it's only available in the second-hand market. I don't have a copy of it, a full proper copy of it. I'd love to get one. The second-hand prices are a bit crazy. Well, not crazy, they're just quite high. And if you want a really good copy, they're hard to come by because time has passed and it has been out of print for an awfully long time. In terms of the editions, first edition, second edition, they were SPIs. They did a little bit with it. They produced a game world, Frontiers of Elusia. The map in the background is the sort of map of Elusia. They did a few scenarios. They had some information in the Ares magazine, I think, and some other bits and pieces thereabouts. The third edition of the game was 1989 by TSR. TSR took over SPI. I think there was some financial concerns. I think TSR pulled in a loan, I think, from SPI. SPI went under. And they took their catalogue with them, and they produced the third edition of Dragon Quest with some changes. I think they took out the worst of the demons in the back of the book. We'll have a look at some of those. But not long after, they basically ditched it, and they ditched it because I suppose it was a competitor to AD&D, which is a shame. And you won't see many. They didn't perpetuate, I think, any of the war game stuff, as far as I know. But there is some more gaming history to come on that, which we'll talk about as well. But the game itself is great. and I've enjoyed running it quite recently. And I'll take you through the original. Well, I'll take you through the second edition, which is the Bantham book, which I have a scan of. You can't currently get a legal copy anywhere. When Wizards of the Coast, who now own TSR, who did own SPI, get their act together and ditch Dungeons and Dragons next edition and instead do a 4th edition of Dragon Quest, which obviously they're bound to do, I will buy a copy. Or they could give it over to fans, open source it, or someone could do a quote-unquote retro clone. And then we can all play it sort of kind of legally. It's quite hard to get hold of, but there are places you can get it, and I'll explain how. Before I dive into the PDF, just a few other things. Have you got this supplement? Have you got Thieves' World? It's one of my favourites. It's a Chaosium supplement of Robert L. Asprin's Thieves' World, and it's multi-statted, and in here you've got Dragon Quest stats as well. Obviously, if I was going to run this now, I'd run it using Dragon Quest, probably. It also talks a bit about here about how mages can have more than one school of College of Magic. We'll look at the colleges of magic. It's marvellous. So it was there and thereabouts in the early 80s. And one of the great things about looking at this is that the text is replete with the assumptions of the early 80s play and the early 80s way of thinking about the world, which dates it. And it dates it in kind of a nice way. You know, you sort of look back. It's of its time. And you've got to allow for that. So we will look at that as well. But I found it great fun to play. And I would recommend you that you take a look. Even if it's just a little dip, just to see what you can find. I'd obviously recommend that you play it, because I think it's a fun game. It has some things which I'll come to. So as I say, I have not got a original copy of the game, and if you'd like to send me one, please do. I'd be very grateful. I am looking at the second-hand market. I should have bought one before this video, because you'd all now go out and buy it, and the prices will inflate even further, and I'll never get a copy. So what I did was I took the open source version, stuck the cover on the top, and spiral printed it, so I had a physical copy to run the game. So this is kind of my version of Dragon Quest. Hope you can see it. It's a bit glary. I've even put plastic over the top to protect it, which shows I'm in for the long haul with this game. Dragon Quest 2nd edition. And I got, again, it's a perfectly readable, playable version of the game, and it's actually, you know, the fact that it's ring bound kind of means that this thing can play quite well at the table. I did also spiral bound another copy of the Skills supplement, but we'll talk about that as well. So that's what I've got. I've run it. I'll talk a bit about my experience of playing it. Let's have a look at the actual 2nd edition text. I'm going to have to head over to the PDF view, and so I'll be with you in a moment. There we go. This is the 2nd edition book. It is a scan, so I'm hoping that's legible. I did do a quick test, and I could just about read it. I hope you can read it. I'm going to go through the text. So these are the alumni who have produced it. Founding members of our role-playing design community, bringing out something called Dragon Quest. Now, the version that I have been using is, as I say, the open source version, which is a redone version of the game. And they've used the 2nd edition as the core base, but it's actually legible, printable. And you can also drag and drop and grab the text on that and incorporate it in handouts, which I did for my game. But let's flip back to the original printing of the 2nd edition of the game. And we'll see what we will find. So I'm going to just scroll through a little bit. So this is what you get in the game. Quite a bit. You get how to create characters. We'll have a look at character generation and what you can get and how they go about it. It's quite interesting. Magic. There's a lot of magic. There's a lot of colleges of magic. It's got a sword and sorcery feel to it, I would say, as a game. So you can play a magic person. You will probably be associated largely with one college of magic, and you will start with quite a large number of the general magics that they have and the ritual magics. And you'll then gain additional magics. Colleges of ensorcement and enchantment, sorceries of the mind, illusions, elemental magics, celestial magics, necromancy, black magics, and summonings of nasty things. The book is interestingly laid out. You get your character generation, loads on magic, and then it goes into skills, monsters, and adventures. So we'll look at the skills. Skills in this game, you get 2 adventuring skills, stealth and horsemanship. And then you get what I'm going to call professional skills. So you could be a rank 1 to 10, alchemist, assassin, astrologer, beastmaster, courtesan, healer, mechanician, merchant, military scientist, navigator, ranger, spy and thief, troubadour. And actually elsewhere, somebody's gone off and created a whole series more of these. Your monsters, a lot of natural beasts, some fantastical monsters, summonables, dragons, undead, plenty to go at. And if you wanted to create a monster based on what you've got there, very easy to do. You just see what's close and make it your own. How to adventure, how to prepare for an adventure, things you need to think about in terms of organising the party. Are you a member of the Adventurers Guild? How are you going to divvy up cash? How do you spend experience points? How do you go up ranks in different things? Your character doesn't have levels, but you have ranks, levels in weapons, spells, skills. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. And then an adventure to finish off. So I'm going to take you. There's a bit about what is role playing. I'm going to take you to page 5, at least in my book, and the 3 themes. So hopefully you can read that. The DragonQuest system. There are 3 general themes. The first is a few restrictions on a character. So there's no classes, and they've deliberately done that. You're not a fighter. You're somebody who has spent experience in weapons, and so you can hold your own in combat. You may select a profession as military scientist, or indeed another profession, which will modify some of your abilities to do things that are martial in the game. But you're not a fighter per se. There is an expansion to the professions, which includes things like warrior, which is, it's just an expansion, which enables you to get little bonuses on focusing on combat. But essentially, you are not a class-based character. You've just spent time and experience getting good at fighting. So, and you can balance things. That means that you can be what you want to be, So that's quite fun, and it's quite nice, and it takes you out of that design conceit. The second is the second theme of the game is that everything is based around the real world and then extrapolated. So they mention here creatures, magics, drawn from sources in existing myth and legend. So they try and cleave to myth, legend, and draw their bestiary, their monsters, their magic from that. But the third concept is quite interesting, and I think this opens the game in a way, if you wish to do that. A third concept in mind during the design process was to maintain the game's flexibility and allow the GM and players to expand on the original rules. They welcome it. The game is there, it's broad-shouldered. It'll take additional skills, additional professions, additional colleges of magic, additional monsters, just lob them in. Now, of course, that is true of probably any game, and indeed most games will have, expansions and supplements. It's written in the game here. They've said here, do that. And so people have. And I think if I was to run the game in a lengthy campaign, the only thing I would tweak, mostly the only thing I think I would tweak is the skills. and I would enable a broader range of base adventurer skills than the two that are available, stealth and horsemanship. And I may include some additional professional skills in the mix. The rest of it I just keep because I like the way it plays. There are some consequences to that, and we'll look at that as well. So there you are. Those are the three principles of the game: open, flexible, based on real world, and adaptable for additions. And any GM who plays this game should embrace those three core themes of the game. It also plays very well, which I'll come to as well. Let me have a look. Yes, so I'm told if you're stuck and you're not sure what to do, then if you look in the bottom right here, since the GM is the final arbiter of these rules, most rule questions should be answered by him. It's always a him in here. We're 1980 now. We don't have theys, and we don't have any she's. Although the game confesses that female persuasion people do play these role-playing game things. It's of its time. So you've got to just get through that. However, if there's any question, and if you've got any questions as well that arises from this video, then, and the GM can't answer it, and I can't answer it, please write to SPI, phrasing your question so they can be answered by a simple sentence, word or phrase. You must enclose a stamped self-addressed envelope. You must write to SPI Rules Questions Editor for DragonQuest, 257 Park Avenue South, New York, New York 10010-7366. So I hope you've got all that. And you can send a letter to SPI. It's great. And I love looking through this game and finding these moments in time where that's how you did things. There wasn't internet. You couldn't fire off a question in a form or in a forum. You wrote a letter. You wrote a letter. Characters then. Let's look at characters in this game. So they're open. There are a number of races, because we're in 1980, so they're races. There's a number of characteristics. You have 6 characteristics. They're quite important. We'll look at those. And there are some optional secondary, and you can include additional secondary. What's notable about this game is there is no intelligence characteristic, and there is no sort of social charisma-based characteristic either. You don't have those. There's an optional physical beauty. You can lob that in if you feel like it. And if you're going to play a courtesan, you're going to have that. It's full of this stuff. Again, perhaps a slight change I might have is to include some additional secondary characteristics. Not necessary to the game. It's necessary for me to play it. But that's all right. Theme 3 said I can extend the game, so I would. Probably there. So what have we got? We've got physical strength. Physical strength, manual dexterity, agility, endurance, magical aptitude, willpower. 2, 3, 4, 5. Willpower are your main 6. Perception is an optional secondary, or I think it's is it an optional? Physical beauty is optional. Physical beauty is optional. Perception you have, and it starts at 8. The range in the game is 5 is your lowest, and it goes up to about 25. That's your range. And your characteristics are used throughout the system with the skills, but they're also used directly. Physical beauty, as I say, is an optional characteristic. If there's no skill, you can make a characteristic roll. And if you look at 4.1 towards the right there on that column, you'll find that there. And this is a bit of gaming history. I wonder if, as I read this out to you, you go, hang about, wait a minute, I recognise that. When a player declares that his character will attempt a task dependent upon a particular characteristic, the ones that are mentioned just over there, then you assign the task a difficulty factor rated from a half, 0.5, through to 5. 0.5 being the most difficult, 5 being the easiest. That's your multiplier. So you multiply the characteristic by the difficulty factor to give you a percentage chance to succeed. So if it's a manual, physical strength, let's say, smashing open a door, it's a difficulty factor 3. 3 times your physical strength, which let's say it's 17, is a 51% chance. 51% unless you do it. Do you recognise that? When SPI was bought out and eventually the design team here moved on, some of them, I'm not sure of all of them, moved across to Victory Games. Victory Games was a subsidiary of Avalon Hill, I believe. And Victory Games produced a tabletop role-playing game called James Bond 007, which you may have played. By the way, that game is great and it stands up very well today. This mechanic was the core mechanic in James Bond 007. Well, it's come from DragonQuest, and you can use this throughout DragonQuest. Bit of gaming history for you. Anyway, it's just fun to see these connections. So those are your characteristics. There is a core mechanic of the game, but it also has skills, which we'll take a look at. So let's go into character generation. How does it work? In the second edition, you roll, if you see the table to the left there, you roll 2d10 and you get a number, and then you cross-reference the number of points you can spend on those characteristics we've looked at, and what the maximum can be for any characteristic. Okay? I think in the first edition it was 4d5, so a different curve. This is 2d10, and then you basically spend the points on the characteristics. 5 is the lowest. Magical aptitude is only useful if you're going to be basically a wizard magic using character. So it's a bit of a dump stat, and it's tempting to make that low if you're not going to go into magical aptitude. But of course you always can. If you spend the time, who knows, maybe your character may learn a dabble of magic later in time. So in some ways there aren't really any dump stats particularly. Your endurance characteristic is your hit points in this game. It's your physical endurance. And when you take damage, we'll have a look at that, you may lose endurance. When your endurance gets to 0, you're dead. And bear in mind the range is 15 to 20, and swords do d10 plus a bit, and can do more. You haven't got a lot of hit points, but you do have fatigue. Fatigue is another important characteristic, and that's based off your endurance. And you can see a little table in the middle there of what your fatigue is. Fatigue is used your fatigue is reduced when you undertake activity. It's reduced when you cast magic, because fatigue is used for magic. Whatever you've got left, fatigue can absorb hits before you get to your endurance. We'll come to that as well. A character's perception value begins at 8, it says here. I think it was 5 in the first edition. I'll talk a bit about how I prorate the characters for my game, but 8 is what they start at. It's cheaper to go up in perception than the other characteristics. We'll look at that again when we look at the experience point spends. You've got on the right there, you've got a tactical movement rate. The game, as I say, plays on a hex grid with facing. Your character is described as a figure. These are war game dudes. So you get a number of movement based on your modified agility. Your agility is affected, I think, by the armor that you wear. So you wear a lot of armor, your agility will go down. It modifies your agility. You look at the table, that's how many hexes you can move in a pulse being a 5-second period of time. This is all done up front, so it's just your movement rate. It's not squares, it's hexes. I did play on squares. I'll talk a bit about that as well. Birthrights. It's quite interesting how they do that. You don't have to be human, and being a different race, I'll use the terms used in the game. We might call it ancestry or kin these days. You've got to roll for it. You get 3 chances not to be human, and the table at the bottom left there shows you your chance. So I want to be a dwarf. 25 or less. Fail. You get 2 more chances. You now cannot be a dwarf. All right. I want to be an elf then. 30 or less. Do you make it? No. Right, you can't be an elf. 1 more. 1 more. Oh, I'll be an orc. Really? All right, 20 or less. Failed. You're human. Or you can just be human. You can be a shapeshifter or a giant or a halfling. Those are your options, at least in the game. Of course, Theme 3, you can expand on these if you wish. They'll have experience cost multipliers for different things. And then you get what you get for being a dwarf or an elf and so on. And there's things like you get characteristic modifiers. Because of the nature of the game, females get less strength. The physical strength of a female character is decreased by 2, but her manual dexterity and fatigue is increased by 1. It's of its time. You don't see a lot of that these days either. And additionally, your race will modify your characteristics and give you abilities, which you can then use in the game. You can be a giant. I mean, again, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. There is some language of the time, but there is some good stuff in here. I love the way it says a character must be either male or female. Every race describes in this section only those 2 sexes. A character may only be hermaphroditic or asexual with the GM's explicit permission. Each player should choose the sex for the character. You don't roll for it. And it is recommended that each character be the same sex as the player. Role-playing a character whose entire gestalt is alien to the player, is hard enough without a change of sex. Of its time. Anyway. Don't let it put you off. There's a good game in here. If it does put you off, it might not put you off. But it could do. And then you've got things like your heritage, your social status, your birth rank. It's a bit CNS of the time as well. You can see elements of CNS in here, Shiver and Sorcery. Are you legitimate? Are you the first child? This affects things like your money and your experience startup. Then you get an allotment of experience, which you start your character with. You spend your experience points to get going, and then you're off. You don't get a lot at what is effectively a beginning character. There are 3 tiers of play. And that depends on the ranks you've got. And when you get to a certain number of ranks, you go up a tier. And that affects how much experience you get given. And we'll look at the experience as well. And then having got your base character, it doesn't look at the skills there. Sorry, over there. It doesn't look at the skills. The skills come later, as I say, and then you go into combat. Combat is a lot of fun. It is tactical. I mean, you could probably play it Theatre of the Mind, but I've got no idea why you're playing DragonQuest, so don't play it Theatre of the Mind. Play it with a grid. Print out some hex paper. That's what I did. And stick your figures on it. Can you use it with squares? Yes, you can. You can. You've just got to change the nature of what the facings are. And it's not quite expecting that, but of course you can play it on a square grid. Or you can ignore it and just play it with a tape measure and do it proper tactical style. But it's designed to play on a hex grid, and I think for the fun of playing this game, you'd get a hex grid. Combat's in 5-second pulses. Actions are, the initiative is rolled at the beginning of each pulse for those that are non-engaged. For those that are engaged, there is an initiative value based on how good you are with the weapon. There's a calculation which we'll take a look at. Combat, I would say, is fast. It's brutal. You want to get a tactical advantage. You don't want to be hit. Believe me, you don't want to be hit. You don't last that long if you get hit. There are ways around it. Carrying a shield is useful. There's quite a lot to it. It plays out really, really well. Let's have a look at a few elements of the combat. There's your hex grid, your melee zone, your rear. If you're hit in the rear, your opponent, you won't get your defense in quite the same way. You certainly won't get your shield. and an opponent will get a plus 30% chance to hit. The game is percentile, I should say. So everything is D100, or damage is D10, and it's basically a D10 game, and everything is encapsulated in that. You've got things like, look at the middle there, you've got like, so a pulse is 5 seconds. It again gives you some timings of other things that you might want to do. So you've got a feeling for that. The initiative value, it's up there actually. Modified agility, again modified for your armor. Your perception characteristic plus rank in the weapon. Ranks in weapons go from 1 to 10. Not for all weapons. Some weapons don't let you get to 10, but that gives you a number. And in the initiative sequence, engaged characters, that's characters that are engaged in combat, go first by initiative value. And then all other characters that are non-engaged, there's a roll. The roll is equal to a d10 plus the leader's perception. So you've got a player who is a leader and is responsible for rolling initiative, and actually responsible for some other things. It's got some noted, it's a bit like a caller in the early games. And if they are a military scientist, they have that profession skill. The rank of that military scientist is also added to the initiative roll. And then you play out the game. You play out and you can do different things. If you're not engaged, you can do certain things. If you're engaged, you can do certain things. If you want to move and attack, you can do that. It's just half your move, round down. And then you strike, and you try and take your opponents out. And you can look to subdue, you look to try and trip an opponent, you can look to disarm an opponent. All these are options that you've got. It's quite nicely done. You can undertake a pass action, you can try to resist an incoming spell. These are actions, and you effectively can do one thing, kind of. You can move and do one thing. Casting a spell, you've got to spend a pulse to prepare, then a pulse to cast. There is a kind of like a house rule where you can fast cast in a pulse, but that makes it even harder to cast and costs you more fatigue. We'll look at spell casting and the backlash table. Yeah. So you can grapple and you can do all sorts of things. Let's have a look. I'm going to take you to the strike chance table. So I'm going to just speed to there. So these are some of the this is the action summary, your special damage chart, and your strike modifiers summaries. I found to run this game as the GM, you need to do one of two things. First of all, you need to know this stuff, and I did. The second is you provide little crib cards for your players. So I gave them the special damage chart on a card. I'll explain why it's important. I kind of gave them the action summary, so they knew what they could do. And I knew this. I knew the modifiers, all of them, pretty much. So I knew what came into play. And if you do that, with kind of one exception, which I'll come to, it's pretty fast. Doesn't look fast from here, does it? You're probably going, well, don't worry, don't panic. It's pretty quick, but you've got to prepare. And as a GM, you just got to know that. You've got to know this table, and you're pretty much away. So the special damage chart's quite interesting. Your strike chance is equal to the base chance of the weapon, plus your manual dexterity, plus 4% per rank. Now, obviously, you pre-calculate that. You don't do that on the fly. So it's just a number, it's just a percentage chance. Your chance to strike an opponent is reduced by the opponent's defense. The defense is typically, not always, their agility. So their agility is at a range of 5 to 25. Let's call it 15. So if it's just a passive defense, then you know your base chance to strike. You have to reduce your base chance by their defense and do that on the fly. So if your base chance is 81 and their defense is 15, then you know it's going to be 66, I think. Yeah, 66. So you need to do that calculation on the fly. If you need a calculator for that, get one. Get one. Or play this game and get better at mental arithmetic. But then on your 66% chance, if you roll 66 or less, you strike the target. Hooray! You can roll your damage, which is usually D10 plus a modifier based on the weapon, plus, optionally, an addition based either on your rank or on your personal strength. And that roll is rolled for your damage. Now, if you roll greater than 15% of your 66%, stay with me, then it's a standard attack and a standard damage, which comes off armor first. Armor absorbs in this game. And then anything left goes off the opponent's fatigue, which comes back a little bit quicker than endurance, and you've got a pool of that. That's a standard hit. You can take a few of those. If it's 15% of your chance, then it's what's called an endurance hit, or a damage directly affecting endurance. Now, the table there tells you what it is. So if it's 66% chance, my chance of doing an endurance-based hit is 1 to 10. So if I roll 10, I do a special hit. Now, this hit goes straight off endurance. Remember, you don't have a lot of that, and armor doesn't count. That's what you want to get. If you get a grievous injury hit, and oh my goodness, my players were looking for these every time they rolled. Well, it's 5%, which is a 1 to 3. So if I roll a 1 to 3, yes, I do the endurance damage. No armor does not count. And then I get to roll on the grievous injury table. Do you want to see the grievous injury table? Of course you do. Let's look at that next. And so you do a grievous injury. So on top of all that, you also spatter your opponent. Where is it? Grievous. It's next door. It's the next page. Here is the grievous injury table. Now, the grievous injury table you roll on after you've done your damage. It's got a bit of a roll master critical hit table feel about it. It's lovely. Really is gorgeous. But don't get too excited, because you might not get a grievous injury on your opponent if you roll on the table. It's based on your weapon. So weapons are class A, B, or C. A's are your stabby pointy, B's are your slashies, and C's are your crushers. So it depends what you get, and each weapon type owns a bit of the grievous injury table range. So I did like it. I mean, I'm just new to the game. I was thinking, I wonder how bad this table is. I didn't really know what was on it. So I said, I'll just pretend I've got a spear and I point at someone. I'm a type A weapon. I'll roll 13. Oh, that's in the range. 1 to 20 is in the A range. A-type weapon. I've got a grievous wound. 13. I'll look up 13. Should we look up 13? Let's look up 13. Your opponent's weapon has entered your eye. Roll 1d10. Ooh, okay, I rolled a d10. I got a 1. On a roll of 1, the weapon has entered your brain and you're dead. That's it. It's over. If you roll higher, well, you're just blinded. And here are some minuses to things like, is it manual dexterity or physical beauty, perception? Ugh. It's that sort of game. If you get a grievous wound, it's game over, man. Game over. Not only that, there are 2 other factors involved in this. One is being stunned, and the other is infection. Let me just cover those 2 now. If you receive damage equal to your endurance divided by 3, so typically that's going to be around about 5 points of damage after you've counted for armor, assuming armor counts, and it's a standard hit, then you're stunned. So it's a bit Norwegian Blue, if you know the Monty Python sketch. You stun fairly easily. And if you're stunned, you may drop your weapon, you'll come last in initiative, you won't get your defense, you're in trouble. All you can do is try and unstun yourself, and that involves a willpower roll times 2 plus your current fatigue level. You've got to know this stuff. So being stunned ain't great. It slows you down. It means you can't do anything other than try and that's the moment that you'll get chopped to bits, probably by your opponent. There's also infection. I'm going to pop back to infection, because even if you survive, you might not, because there's infection. Oh yeah. So the chance of being infected, the base chance is 10%. So at the end of a battle, you'll roll to see if you're infected. If you took any damage to endurance, so remember, you can take endurance damage or fatigue damage. The chance of being infected is much higher if you actually have taken physical endurance damage. So it's add 20 plus the amount of endurance damage points you took. So let's say it's another 30. So suddenly you're looking at a 40% chance of infection. And if it was done by bite, claws, or talons from a huge monster, you add 20% on top. And there might be the grievous injury table we just looked at also may give you additional sort of infection possibilities. Then you roll. If you're infected, then you are diseased, and you will take endurance damage every day until you get healed. And if you don't get healed, that infection will kill you. It's brutal, mate. It's brutal. Honestly, it is. So there's that. Hence, we've got some professions which will support you and enable you to get through and out of grievous wounds, infection, and so on, and bring you back. But it's no 5e. Don't think D&D 5e. You know, you don't wake up in the morning and all your endurance is back. My goodness, no. After a few days, you'll get a point of endurance back, unless you're encouraged or helped. There's some magic involved. And your fatigue comes back, you know, after a good rest and a hot meal. You won't get all of it back, but you'll get a chunk of it back. So, a long rest and just getting your fatigue back is probably, I don't know, I'm going to say a week. I could be being unfair to the game, but don't think 5e. It ain't that. Weapons. We've seen that chart. We've seen the grievous wound. Look at that hex. See, they've even put a hex grid in for you. Just print that out. Don't complain to me. And if you haven't got figures, go to Printable Heroes and print out some. There you are. You're done. It was great. You then go into magic. And magic is a lot of fun. You've got a spell casting chance. There's a base chance to cast a spell, any spell, just as you've got a base chance with weapons. You've got a rank in the spell. Ranks in spells go from 1 to 20 rather than 10, and you get 3% per rank. If your magical aptitude is over 15, every point over 15 gives you a bonus. So you get a chance to cast a spell. And there's lots of them. And you will join a college of magic. Things resist your spells, so there's natural magic resistance, which is generally equal to opponent's willpower. But if they're not a member of your magical college, they'll get a plus 20. So there's a reasonable chance that something might resist your magic. But again, some nice things. You know that weapon 15% and 5%, that applies to spell casting as well. But in this, it either double or triples the effect of the spell. That could be damage. It could be taking away magic resistance. It could increase the duration, or it could increase the range. So if you roll low on your spell casting, you get more effect. Nicely done. If you roll over your magic, then you could have a backlash. That's not so great. And we'll look at some spells. Well, no, I'll tell you what, let's look at an example spell. I'm going to take you straight to an example spell so you get a feel for it. So let's look at the spell of Enchanted Sleep, which is right column text. Okay, hope you're with me. So the spell of Enchanted Sleep. Range is 15 feet plus 15 per additional rank. So let's say I'm rank 4 in this. So I get, 75 feet of range. Okay, each hex is 5 feet. So, you just can't count it out. The duration of the sleep is an hour plus 4 because I'm rank 4. The experience multiple, this is as you increase in rank. That's the multiplier to rank. So I think I'm right in saying if I wanted to go to rank 5, that's 1,250 experience points. 5 times 250. The base chance. I wanted to show you this one. Spell of Enchanted Sleep. Base chance is 15%. I've got rank 4, so that's an extra 12, so I'm 27%, and my magic aptitude might give me another 5%, say. It's 32% chance. It's not very high. Now, you can prepare a spell, and for, I think, every hour, you get another bonus. I haven't got it in front of me. It's 3%, 5%, something like that. I think. 3%, I think. That doesn't apply, obviously, in tactical combat play. Now, if I was to say, that. Well, no, we'll come to the backfire. But remember, some of these spells are difficult to cast. The base chance of these spells are low. Weapon-based chances are in the 50s, 40s, 50s. Not for your magic. And you have got 20 ranks to get through. You will get there in the end if a spell backfire doesn't get you first. So that's an example of a spell. Lots of very lovely colleges of magic, elemental magic, enchantment magic, summoning magic. You will tend to focus on one college. As I say, there are some optional rules in the Thieves' World supplement for being able to learn multiple colleges. And there's no reason why not, but that's all time and effort. And you really want to get these spell ranks up, otherwise you're in trouble. I've picked out another one. I'm going to jump to page 80 here. And we're going to look at something that you can summon. Look at Thoras there in the middle, towards the right. He's the President and Lord of Seekers. Your base chance to cast him is 42%. Apply the bonuses that you have. And he appears in the form of a strong man, unarmed, and mild-seeming. Oh. And then he's got all the things. He's a master of illusion. He has astrologer, healer, mechanician, merchant, navigator, and troubadour. So all the professional skills that you as a character might start to try and learn. He can make you invisible. He's a linguist, teacher of language. He can discover hidden things, especially treasure. You can just wander about and say, oh, that, can you see that? Can't you? I can. There you go. He's a human. Apparently, he can wear any armor, and nice things. Look at the comments section there. Thoras will grant you long life, triple your lifespan if you worship him. Worship him, and do not summon and dabble in anybody else. Devote yourself to me, and you will have a life seeking and learning. There's no downside, etc. There's an entire scenario there, just in someone who summons Thoras, President and Lord of Seekers. The game is full of this stuff. It's lovely. I promised you a backfire table. You can't wait, can you? You want to get to the backfire table. Let's go to the backfire table. Let's have a look at it now. There it is. Beautiful. Beautiful. How does a backfire happen? Look, remember your base chances. You've got to think about what spells to cast. If in a tactical combat play, you cast and you're 30% over your cast chance. And if somebody is actively resisting, you've got to take their active resistance off your cast chance if they're actively resisting. It can happen. It's more likely to be a passive resistance which doesn't come off your chance. 30% over, I think it could be a backlash. There's a chance of a backlash. I should have checked that. But if you do finally, and if it's not in tactical play, it's 40% over your chance. Less likely, but still possible. You roll on the backfire table. There might be a thing that gets you around having to roll on this table, but if you're here and you get to the backfire table, you roll on this. Now, spoiler, I may have played it wrong, actually. A little bit wrong in this case. I did know the game pretty well, but I may have made a mistake here. But our mage did roll a backfire. And he immediately rolled. It wasn't great. I think he became senile. He got 91 to 95, so he rolled a whopper. And his magical aptitude is reduced by 2 and takes ages to get cured. And it's nasty. It lasts for ages. You're cursed, immediately cursed with some horrendous result. Backfires. It's a good laugh, though. Oh dear. Spells, magic. It's great. It's good fun. More hexes. You'd almost think they want you to print these all out. The third book is Skills, Monsters and Ventures. We're getting there. Let's have a look at this. Acquiring skills. So you acquire skills. You spend experience points after a session to go up in ranks in these skills. There's 2 types, as I say. There's adventurous skills, of which there's only 2 in the game. Stealth and horsemanship, because sneaking around and riding stuff is all that you need to do. But then you've got these professional skills, which give you a raft of abilities. You go up in the rank of the profession, and that gives you a whole subset of abilities that go up as you go up with the owning professional skill. So it's a profession-based skill system with sort of adventurous skills as well as, don't forget, your characteristic times a difficulty factor. So there's lots of ways of going about it. And you can be taught, you can train yourself as well, you can do practice to try and get experience points and go up, so that you then go up in a rank in abilities. You've got spoken abilities, spoken and learned languages. I was going to show you the assassin. There's the assassin, just as an example of a profession-based skill. If I was to run the game, I would have about a dozen adventurous skills that were standard, that everyone has. It wouldn't obviate the sort of very, very nice professional skills that you get. That they would give you extras and sort of quite specialised abilities. But I think I would build up slightly the adventurous skills. But, the assassin, increases the chance of causing one of those grievous injuries, especially if you are stabbing from the back and so on. You're able to distill venoms and acids. You can... an assassin causes his target increased damage when attacking through a rear hex side. You can increase the knockout chance, so you can knock people out more effectively. You know what to do. You know the pressure points. So they augment and add to what's already available to you in the game. I did want to have a look at another one. So there's a number in here, and as I say, the community has got, there's another 90 that they've made that you can decide to add into your game or not. Just stay with the ones that are here. You can do that. The courtesan, I include that because I sort of couldn't resist it because it's a courtesan, and obviously has made its seduction roll 54.3. If you're sexually compatible, obviously, there's a roll, physical beauty plus 10 times your rank. If you make the roll, depending on a modifier, you can seduce somebody and they become infatuated with you, and you go off to a tent somewhere and blah blah blah. And again, you can see in 54.2 there, middle bottom, as you go up in ranks of courtesan from 1 to 10, although you can get more beyond 10. Once you get to courtesan rank 8, you can tell good jokes. I love it. You're a rounded courtesan. You really are great company. You're basically fantastic company. My goodness, are you great company. There's your courtesan. So it covers a whole range of things. The healer is, well, useful to have. You know what I've just mentioned about grievous wounds and so on? Get yourself a healer. You need one of those. And nicely, if you're a healer, it minimises some of the offensive combat capabilities of your character, because your mindset is, I'm a healer. I want to preserve. I want to heal. And there's almost a semi-magical nature to the healing here. Again, it's well done. So there's your healer. There's things like a reaction table. So you can sort of roll on a reaction table. Here it is. So if you're not sure about how a particular encounter is going to go, you can roll randomly. You can apply modifiers. You could, for example, apply courtesan ranks, or you could apply something else. Or you could have some sort of persuasion adventurer skill, which isn't in the game. It may be sort of vaguely alluded to in courtesan or troubadour. And if you make the roll, then you get a plus 30 to the reaction roll or something. But you roll on the reaction roll to see how that plays out. I used that in the game. It was really good fun to do that. Adds a bit of variety to it. There are also lots and lots of, monsters, creatures. There's enough to go on here to create anything that you really want to create yourself. I'll pick out one. So I picked up the hill giant here. If you can see the hill giant. 9 feet tall, talent, skills and magic. Could be a magic using hill giant, up to a maximum of rank 3. 25% chance of that. You make a roll. And then you've got the characteristics there. PS, personal strength, manual dexterity, agility, magical aptitude, endurance, fatigue, willpower, perception, personal beauty, tactical movement rate, your hexes, natural armor, and something about weapons. So they would have the base chance of the weapon, plus ranks up to 1 to 5, and they'd be calculated just like any character. Wouldn't take very long at all. So you've got ranges. So actually characters and monsters are very much like characters with ranges. They give you the range. A few notes, bit of a description, go. That's it. Quite nice. There's sort of interesting stuff about the game conventions. So there's a section which, you know, is on preparing for an adventure, getting into the actual game itself. What do you as a GM have to do? What do players have to do? And it's quite codified here, probably more codified than you might expect. But it's basically all here. Timescale for the campaign. So what is it? 2 or 3 days per real day. So if you play in sort of 14 days, that's fine. 42 days have happened in the campaign. Time moves on. So if you wanted to mirror real play, because it's designed for campaign play, you can tell. You have these downtimes, you do training, you've got to keep your skills up, you've got to practice your skills, you've got to spend money to ensure that you keep your ranks. This can all be played around with. It's even quite, you know, rule 78.4 there. There's actually constraints on you talking at the table in tactical combat play. You're not allowed to do it. You shouldn't do it. You should just say what you're doing, and if you change your mind, you've got a very short period of time to change your mind, and you can change what you're doing in your pulse. If you've got a military scientist with you, they give you 60 seconds. I mean, genuinely, I think a GM's got to have like a little hourglass to actually talk around. Well, what are we going to do? You're going to go there. You're going to go there. You do that. Okay, let's do it. Otherwise, you can't, because you are focused on the combat. And so it is with organising the party. You should work out the division of spoils. If you're a member of the Adventurer Guild, they give you some benefits. They also take some money from you. What happens to NPCs? Who runs the NPCs? It's all in here. It's all in here. There's a lot to go at. Monetary management, the adventure sequence, trek weight, encounter, chase, tactical, different stages of the game. Fatigue, loss and recovery. Right at the end, it comes down to, well, how do you give people back their fatigue and how do you give back their endurance? Well, the answer is you need a hot meal, top left, hot meal, and a sleep. Fatigue points back per hour. Okay, so actually, to be fair, your fatigue will come back after a long rest, won't it? 6 hours sleep, that's 18 fatigue point. You're not going to have a lot more than 18 fatigue points. And if you've got a hot meal before you go to sleep, that's 20 fatigue points. You're doing pretty well. If your character's endurance is less than 10, you recover half those. That balance between endurance and fatigue, quite nicely done. And endurance doesn't come back as quickly. It's every few days you get a point back, kind of thing. I mean, it can be modified again as long as if you're not exerting yourself, that helps. If you've got a healer helping you, that helps. You can curse people. If you had a really bad time in the session, you can just curse people. I'm going to curse that person. These are magics, of course, which, you know, that's why you shouldn't trust a mage. They could curse you. You know, take treasure off that mage. Look out, could get cursed. Yeah, and then there's recuperation and upkeep. There's quite a lot to this game. I do like it. I do like it. Let me take you to page 147, which is the next page. How experience is gained, which is quite nice. The experience point chart. Look at 86.1. in the middle there. Take a look at that. The GM should make one set of experience point awards for every 5 hours of effective play during one session. 5 hours play. How long are your game sessions? 2? You weak. We play for 10 hours in DragonQuest. Play all day. Every 5 hours, you get experience points. I love that. I love it. I love the assumptions that are built into the fabric of the game based on the expected experience of how you play. And this takes you back. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I could probably do that. I'd say, right, we'll have a 5 hour session. We're going to have a hot meal and gain back a few points of fatigue. And then we'll play another 5 hour session. How are you doing for that? What, you have to work? Oh, stop it, don't be silly. Play this instead. And then you get a number of experience points, depending on your level, and the base award being 600. You build it up, and then you spend your experience points. Let's have a little look at spending experience points. Here we go. You can buy fatigue, endurance, your perception, which is a bit cheaper than the others, and then all the others. And they're fairly expensive. If you want, if you want to increase your personal strength or something, you're going to really have to devote a lot of your experience to that. Your 2 adventurous skills, stealth and horsemanship, can go up, and indeed any others that you've added to the game. As I say, I probably add about another 10, and I'm making a list now for my next game. I am playing it. I want to play it. And then by rank, how many experience points it costs to go up for a weapon. We've already looked at the experience point multiplier for spells. You increase your spells as well. It's all there. Those are the professions that you can have in the game. Where's the courtesan? I was 4th level, wasn't I? Well, at 4th level, courtesans are cheap. There must be a reason for that. I want to go to 5th. It's going to cost me 1,450 experience points. There will be things in here that if you've got, high personal beauty and blah, 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 it will cost you less to go up. Okay. Experience, it's all there. And then you've got your character sheet, which, yes, looks like a tax return. They all did in those days. And that is pretty much the game. You've then got an adventure. That is Dragon Quest. But, these games are fine. But really what you want to do is get the game yourself, print it out, get it on the table, and play. Because you don't know what the game's like until you play, do you? So let me switch to my table at a convention called Dragon Meet. It's called Dragon Meet. It's not called Dragon, it's Grog Meet. Dragon Meet's coming up. I'm getting confused. I'm going to Dragon Meet next week, so it's on my mind. And this is Dragon Quest. This is Grog Meet. Grog Meet is a wonderful convention in Manchester every year. It's for games for back in the day and today. And the podcast, I'll do a link to the podcast as well, which is kind of, and it's the guys who do the podcast that kind of run the event. It's a wonderful, beautiful event. If you can go to any convention, get yourself to Grog Meet. It's good fun. It's back in the day. So I thought, well, I'll run Dragon Quest then. How back in the day do you want to get? That's pretty back in the day. So here I am. That's my table, waiting for people to turn up. The characters are ready. I've got my Dragon Quest tactical combat display. That's just me printing out A4 bits of paper, making them 25mm and putting a little logo on the bottom. I had a devil of a job lining up those hexes. Ideally, I'd send it to a print shop and do it properly, but maybe do it on some kind of nice surface. But anyway, that's my table, and I ran a game of Dragon Quest. It went pretty well. I really enjoyed it. This is us in mid game. I did use a sort of D&D 5e scenario. I got off the Dungeon Masters Guild. Very good. It was good fun. Nice scenario. I did use squares, Yes, we used a tactical display. It was squares. It wasn't hexes. It wasn't quite right, but it frankly wasn't really a problem at all. Those are some standees that I was using, and we played out some tactical play as well as some role playing. It was a good 3-act structure, and I think it went reasonably well. I was very fortunate to have a really, really lovely group of players. This is my group. They were great. And they really lent into the game, big style. I was so lucky to get such a generous and able set of players. I'll pick out. I mean, they're all great, but I'll pick out Guy in particular on the right there, who played the mage, the elf mage, who was perfect. He was perfect. He ran it brilliantly as a sort of a overconfident sort of mage. Suffered the backlash and did it all with extremely good grace. Stunned easily, grievous wounds. Did they? Didn't they? I didn't manage to get one grievous wound on any of them. That's why I had to run the game again. So, actual play. I think we found in actual play there was just getting used to taking off the defences from the strike chances. You just had to be able to do that in your head or have a calculator in front of you. It's generally a percentage between 15, could be more, if you're actively evading in the game, it's not, and that's all you do, so it's a full defense if you like, then you get 4% times your rank, you get your shield, you get plus 10% as well when you're evading. So the number gets much higher, so it could be up to into the 30s. You take off your strike chance. One number minus another number, your chance to hit, and then that modified base chance is what you look up on the table to see if you do an endurance damage wound or a grievous wound. But it plays well, and it's dangerous, and you're hoping your armor is going to save you. It does actually work. So there you are, Dragon Quest in actual play, and a hell of a lot of fun, I have to say. So there are a couple of places that you can get the game. Should you want to play Dragon Quest, and you do, don't you? You do, of course you do. It is fun. And by the way, there is a community. There's a Dragon Quest page on Facebook with some really knowledgeable people who actually really understand the game more than I do, who play it and still playing it, love it. Some of them have not played anything else for 40 years. It's that kind of group. And they're so knowledgeable and so supportive as well. They've been so supportive of me. I've asked questions and got excited, and they've all encouraged. So it's a really nice community. So you can go there for more information. There's also a site which has virtually all the PDFs and lots of additional PDFs. Look out for, in the rules section there, 2.19. 2.19 is the revised second edition, and with that you've got the game. There is a very nice skills booklet in there as well. So well worth looking there. So you can get the game. You can find the game secondhand. Secondhand prices I found is high. I have got my eye on one at the moment for a fairly pristine hardback second edition book is £120. Do the calculation in your own currency if you're not a GP UK GP pounds. 120. Box sets will go for anything from £70. Often if they're States based, there'll be postage on top, which makes it really out of the question for me. And you can get some third edition soft covers as well. The one I want is 120 quid. I haven't gone for it. I am enthusiastic. I love the game. And for a really good hardcover, I am actually tempted to go for that. Could I use a bad scan and print it and stick a cover on it? I could. It wouldn't look anything as good as the original book. So I'll leave those links for you. I would encourage you to have a look at it and maybe get some play in. It's well worth it. Yes, it's a game of its time. Skill-based. Fast-ish. Tactical combat. A wider range of colleges of magic. Once you get your handle on some of the key tables in the game, it plays and runs pretty smoothly. there's things like magic, damage caused by magic operates slightly differently. It always goes off fatigue first. Armor never counts. Different to physical combat damage. But once you start to get into the groove, it didn't take me long. You can run a whole game, and you can run it fairly quickly. And run it on a tactical display. Get some miniature standees. If you haven't got figures, get some standees. They're so cheap to get now. Print them out on an inkjet printer. That's what I do. You're off. You're off. Great little fantasy gameplay. Do play it. That's it for today. I hope that's been of some kind of interest to you. DragonQuest. What a great game. Cheers. Talk to you soon.